Leon.
6 Music.
You are now entering a parallel universe.
And wipe your feet on the way in.
Marc Riley, BBC 6 Music.
Not that long ago, but I would play it every blooming night if I could. That is Echo and the Bunnymen and the Cutter, and I'm Marc Riley here, whilst on a little screen in front of me is Mr. Bobby Hughes. Hello, mate.
Hello, mate. Are you well?
A bit rattly, but I'm getting there, Everybody's had the lurgy at some point, haven't they, recently?
Yeah, lots of it about. So we're looking at the NME here, 12th of February 1983. I can only just struck me now, nearly 40 years to the day.
Scary,
Terrifying.
man, scary.
Oh. The Bunnymen at number 7 in the singles chart. On the news page 3, Laurie Anderson is to give an extra performance of her marathon work, United States, at London's Dominion Theatre on Sunday. She's presenting the work at the venue in 2 parts, which means visiting the theatre on 2 successive nights in order to catch the complete epic. But the extra Sunday show will start at 2 p.m, and with just one interval will feature the full work in its entirety. United States looks at various aspects of American culture, including politics, transportation, money and love. These shows mark its European premiere. So this was like music, spoken word pieces, animated vignettes. Oh Superman was part of all this. It was all to do with America. So there's a live album too that went on for 4.5 hours.
Oh dear.
So it really was a big old unit.
Well, you see now, you laughed at me when I coined that phrase not long ago in relation to music, but now there's you jumping on the Riley bandwagon like everybody else.
Yeah, once again. Yeah, so I have to admit, I don't really know that work, but I'm guessing you have to really sit with it and live with it for quite some time.
Well, 4.5 hours,
in fact.
Yeah, I don't think I would. I mean, live albums, there aren't many. I don't like live albums, generally speaking. I love Rock and Roll Animal, I love David Live. There's a few more that I can't just call to mind at the moment, but generally speaking, an hour of a live album, it would be enough. 4.5 hours sounds pretty damn challenging, doesn't it?
Absolutely. One of my favourite live albums, I'm with you on that, but one of my favourites is It's Alive by the Ramones. That is a corker.
Right.
On the news page underneath that, plans to stage an ambitious 10-night season of rock concerts at London Chalk Farm Roundhouse this month, reported by NME in December, have had to be scrapped by the would-be promoters Head Music. The idea took shape when, after 4 years, the venue was given the go-ahead to resume rock shows on a limited basis of 10 per year, and Head decided to use the 1983 allocation in one fell swoop. It soon became apparent that such a massive venture needed more time to organise, and also this is now proved impossible with the news that the Roundhouse is up for sale and will be closing at the end of March. I mean, it's such a shame, isn't it? You've got this incredibly iconic venue that are just steeped in history, especially, we talk about psychedelic rock, sort of late 60s, early 70s. Everybody played the Roundhouse, didn't they? And it was important for the punk. When punk sort of started firing in London as well, wasn't it? 76.
Well, I mean, that was the night that the Flaming Groovies played and the Stranglers and the Ramones opened for them, so that's legendary itself. Also, the night that glam rock was invented, when the Hype played there and Mark Bolan was in the audience. But it is a case of, you don't know what you've got till it's gone, because it is a fantastic venue anyway. For those who don't know, it is at the end of a railway line, isn't it? And it's a roundhouse. It was a massive turntable used to turn round a carriage or the engine. So and obviously now it's a legendary venue in its own right currently. But to close it down at the time, it's happened so many times, hasn't it? We know that.
Yeah, so, the year we're talking about here, 1983, it fell back into the hands of Camden Council. It wasn't until another 13 years, 1996, it was actually bought by a local businessman, so it was just standing idle for so long.
Right.
In the news as well, Arthur Brown this week releases his first new album since the crazy days of Arthur Brown a decade ago. In the meantime, he's been keeping a low profile at his home in Texas, emerging occasionally to make the odd cameo appearance with the likes of The Who and the Alan Parsons Project. So I was just wondering here, this must have been around the time that he fell in with Jimmy Carl Black of the Mothers, and they did have, so the story goes, a painting and decorating business called Brown and Black, or Black and Brown. I can't remember which way around.
Well, I suppose he had a power struggle with that one, but it is, mentioning, as we often do, Mark Bolan and David Bowie. I mean, they met painting their agent's office.
That's right.
Didn't they? And they didn't finish the job, and George Underwood had to go in, Bowie's mate had to go in and finish the job, apparently. But the thought of one of the mothers of invention and Arthur Brown, I wonder if he had the clobber on, I wonder if he had the hat on with the horns on fire. That I would pay for that.
I would have just got him round just to have a look at him. Never mind painting the place.
Well, do you know, it's funny because I was saying just on Monday night when we had Liz in for America Calling, that Richard Lloyd, she lives in New York, obviously Richard Lloyd from television, we were talking about Tom Verlaine, and Richard Lloyd gives out guitar lessons in New York, and whether you were regarded yourself as being a future guitar player or a half-decent guitar player or not, if you'd never picked one up, you would go to Richard Lloyd's house and give him $50 just to sit there and look at him play guitar and say, you have spent half an hour watching Richard Lloyd play guitar. So to get those two in to decorate your house, it's a winner.
Absolutely. Private gig. There is a very short report here called Progressive Report, the re-emergence of prog. 1983, Marillion is starting to take off, and the first album actually recorded at the Marquee is due any minute, it says. Now, NME reports on Solstice, who've just taken on a new singer, Palace, Tamarisk, Liaison, and Pendragon. I do remember Pendragon. There's a letters page directly underneath that. It's relating to the above. Peter Cassidy writes in from London, defending some comments about Marillion that was made in the paper by a writer a week earlier. He says, if he thinks he knows so much about Marillion, why does he term them a poor man's Genesis? Seems to me if you spent more time listening to the music and less time counting Genesis patches, you'd realise there are vast differences between the two. Does this cretin really believe that Genesis fans are unable to appreciate Marillion for themselves and their music? There were a lot of comparisons flying about, though, weren't there, back in the day? I do remember that.
Yeah, I suppose that prog it hadn't completely died out. I mean, and Genesis were bigger than ever at that point in time, weren't they? But it wasn't very popular. It's a little bit like the new wave of British heavy metal, isn't it? Because heavy metal had fallen out of favour, and then there was all these kids coming through thinking, hang on a minute, I actually love this stuff. And so finding a new audience, which was massive in the end. So
it was.
Fair play to them. They weren't following any trends. They were booking it.
Absolutely. So there's only one place to go, really, after Marillion, isn't there?
Yeah, Grace Jones, is it?
Of course there is.
Here we go. With my Jamaican guy, Mark Riley, with my Yorkshireman. This would be Rob Hughes. Hello, mate.
That's the worst link. That is terrible.
Mate, there's plenty of time left, don't you worry.
I love that record. It's so well produced. Berlin bass later this month. They'll play on a number of dates in support of their newly released 4-track EP, The Bad Seed, on 4AD Records. The highlight is a headliner at London's Lyceum Ballroom on the 7th of March. This is preceded by gigs at Leeds Polytechnic, St Albans City Hall, Brighton Jenkinson's, and Manchester Hacienda. So I might have asked you this before. Is this the one you were at? Were you there, Hacienda, 1983?
Yeah. I saw the birthday party there, and I also saw the first Bad Seeds tour there, I think I'm right in saying.
Okay. So this wasn't the throwing lights incident one. That was somewhere else, wasn't it?
No, that was the very first tour in probably 1979 at Rafters in Manchester.
Right, okay. The Bad Seed itself is reviewed by Barney Hoskins. He said, while much of Junkyard verged on self-parody, its high moments blew away the rest of last year's competition. The birthday party enter a new space every time they play. Go through each member of the band. Roland Howard's guitar is a chameleon, he says, ready at any instant to change from a piano or a horn section into a typhoon of feedback. Mick Harvey's drums approach rhythm with a sense of chance and brutality. And as for Tracy Pugh's bass, well, that's simply the earth opening and closing around our very being, he writes.
Watching Tracy Pugh playing live was just so great. I mean, you never saw him playing live, did you?
No, I wish I'd seen Birthday Party, but I didn't see him.
Right. I mean, he used to wear leather pants and have like a black string vest on. I know it sounds like verging towards Rabsy Nesbitt, but believe you me, it wasn't. And he had a cowboy hat on, and he used to lean backwards as well whilst he was playing. He had that big moustache. He was just a brilliant showman.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. Yeah, I wish I'd seen them. There's a couple of news items here regarding new magazines. So the 4th issue of Collusion, the world's most eclectic music mag, has just hit the newsstands, and like its pioneering predecessors, the current issue uncovers a wealth of unlikely and neglected music with a rare enthusiasm and expertise. The Twist, Hawaiian steel guitars, Florence de Jong, Disney soundtracks, and Sun Ra buying his socks in the supermarket are just some of the topics touched upon. Sharing, that didn't last very long. I did some research here. It lasted for 5 issues, so it went bust by the end of this year.
Right.
But underneath that, it says sharing the newsstands is the 2nd issue of The Wire, which continues its explorations of mostly modern jazz with articles on various people. Some of the writing needs livening up, but like Collusion, The Wire scores heavily for its breadth of interest and its love of the music. With The Wire due to go bi-monthly soon, jazz buffs will at last have a regular magazine that both knows and cares about the music it purports to represent. So as you know, it's still going strong. It just became, the go-to publication for avant-garde and experimental music, didn't it?
Yeah, it's branched out a bit more, hasn't it?
Yeah. So the cover star this week on NME is Richard Hell. I know you mentioned Tom Verlaine here.
Yeah.
So the reason for the interview, he's got a part in... I haven't seen Smithereens. Have you seen that film?
I don't think I have, you know.
It's set in New York sort of punk world, isn't it? And he plays a smirking, opportunistic rogue and a bit of a charmer in it. So the talk it's ostensibly centred around that. But of course, it gets onto the whole CBG scene and the thing that he helped spawn. And this is fairly fresh, isn't it? Because 1983, we're talking still only 6-7 years before that whole scene broke.
Yeah,
you know?
true.
So he's asked about why certain bands made it, others didn't. He says, I can guess why the Ramones didn't make it. I don't know why television didn't, and I know exactly why I didn't. Commercial success was never my main priority. My music was cryptic enough that the only way to make it popular would have been to tour all year long for 3 years, which is what Blondie and Talking Heads did. I was never willing to do that, and I don't regret the decision at all. Goes on to talk about various other things. And of course, Tom Verlaine comes up because they were twins, so for such a long time, it's such an intense friendship, wasn't it?
Yeah, again, we were talking about this to Liz the other night, just because Tom Verlaine's relationship with Richard Lloyd was fraught, and his relationship with Richard Hell was fraught even quicker. So who knows, not being judgmental at all on it, but so Richard Hell was a pretty spiky character, is a pretty spiky character.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. He says that friendship we had was volatile. He says, when I first came to New York, I bought a printing press for $100 and I was publishing books and pamphlets out of my house, collaborating on a lot of stuff with Tom. We were living together then and hanging out all the time. And it was right before we started playing. He said, we used to stay up all night writing stuff. I always considered our writing projects the literary equivalent of what television was musically, at least when I was a member. But with me and Tom's roles reversed. With the writing projects, I ran everything and made all the decisions. In television, Tom had all the power because of course, he was such a great musician. And when I did a piece on Tom Verlaine for one of the monthlies a year or so ago, and I had a few back and forth with Richard Hell, and he was very, very thoughtful about this whole subject. He didn't really want to talk about it because it was such a complex friendship that he couldn't really kind of get into the real sort of nitty gritty in a shortish magazine article. So he declined. Yeah,
I mean, I suppose there was a lot of vitriol there and probably distrust, or mistrust. And as the years go by, you mellow, don't you? And there's no point in keeping it going, I suppose. I mean, particularly they're still living in the same city and presumably bumping into each other on several occasions.
Yeah, that's the thing. And from what I gather as well, Tom Verlaine was a creature of habit, so he'd kind of be on the same streets all the same time. Gigs this week, 1983, you got Richard Hell, Talking of Which, and the Voidoids at Hull Dingwalls. Joni Mitchell at Birmingham NEC. You've got the Go-Betweens at Brixton Ace Cinema, Southern Death Cult at Derby Blue Note, Fad Gadget at Hacienda in Manchester, John Cooper Clarke at Dingwalls in Hull. Popular. The Raincoats at London University Union, the Milkshakes at the Asylum in Nottingham, Randy Newman at Edinburgh Playhouse, Funboy 3 at Portsmouth Guildhall, Bill Nelson and the Frank Chickens at London Dominion Theatre, Soft Cell at Hammersmith Palais, and Napalm Death at Sherwood Community Centre in Nottingham. And also, I noticed just earlier, at Liverpool Royal Court, Thin Lizzy. So this was my second ever gig at the time, February 83.
Any good?
Yeah, they were brilliant. And then I met Phil Lynott afterwards. A few of us met him, so that was my first rock star experience. So it was quite a night.
Right, okay, yeah. I mean, he seemed like such a great fella.
Yeah, definitely. Live review here. Got, let's see, Richard Cook goes to see John Cale at the Venue. So he's on tour at the minute, isn't he, John Cale?
Yeah, mentioned earlier. I was supposed to go and see him in Liverpool on last Monday night, but I couldn't because I was on air. He's out on the road again. They were the postponed tour.
Yeah, and the album is Mercy, which is great as well. Yeah. It says here, he played it completely straight tonight. 2 sessions with an acoustic guitar, 2 with the ponderous strength of his grand piano, no notable psychotic fits or blind fury or avalanche of evil, and no irrelevance or waste. Although John Cale's one-man show declined to offer any startling new insight into an extremely fine and fascinated mind, it freshened the complexion of songs that a long and erratic career has frequently muddled and misdirected. This, he says, with Cale unadorned, no elaborate lights, and absence of stage paraphernalia. Well, of course, he could pull it off because he had the chops for all that as well, didn't he? But I know you saw him at his sort of, what he's calling here, he's probably his psychotic prime in the mid to late 70s.
I did, but I also saw him on what would have been that tour or at that time at the Hacienda doing exactly that, doing some songs with guitar and some with piano.
Oh, fantastic. Quickly, too, you've got Kev Mack goes to see the Farm at Liverpool left bank. He said it's been taken over by the uniformed Scallies in their usual ebullient form, who've taken to adopting the Farm in increasing numbers, mainly because of the presence of one Peter Hooton. Hooto, as he's affectionately known, is co-editor of the uniquely hilarious and acutely relevant The End, far and away the country's best fanzine. He's also vocalist with the four-piece The Farm, who haven't been around long, but already one of our more promising groups. So he is a character as well. And he's now a member of Spirit of Shankly, isn't he? The Liverpool supporters group.
Is he? Right, okay,
He
don't
is.
surprise me, right.
Yeah, okay. We haven't got much time left, but there's a couple of public NMEs if we've got time.
Just a quick one, mate.
All right, just a quick one. The Clash will appear as a raucous rock band called Street Scum in Martin Scorsese's long in the making The King of Comedy. Joe Strummer and Mick Jones have key scenes with Robert De Niro and Jerry Lewis. Okay. I mean, they're hardly in it, aren't they? But that is it's such a sort of passing thing. But what a film.
One of my favourite films, and we were in New York at the time because the fall opened for the Clash at Bonds and all that, and that's when they were doing the filming for it. But anyway, we got to go, Bobbert, so enjoyed that enormously as always. You take care, pal.
You too.
Gideon Coe is next, and we will leave you now with The Clash and Know Your Rights. And thanks for listening. We'll see you on Monday night. Bye-bye.
This is the Parallel Universe.
Mark Riley, BBC 6 Music.
And shut the door on your way out.